Hey guys, it's Chip again in the shop, and I'm so glad you could join me. Today I want to do a short video on what are the parts of a ham plane. A viewer sent me in that question and wanted to see if I could explain what all those parts are and what they're for. So let's get to it. We're going to show you a plane. Okay guys, I figured the best way of showing you this was to disassemble a plane, and I'm going to show you the parts as I reassemble this. So what we've got here, this bottom casting, is made out of cast iron, and this is called the base, this whole thing. Now it has different parts to it and different areas that have different names. So let me run you through those. This side here, okay, has a shape sort of like a wing, so they call this a wing, and you have one on each side. The bottom, okay, this bottom is called the sole, like the sole of your foot. And the front part of that sole is called the toe. The back part is called the heel. And of course, that kind of makes sense in relation to a human foot. And now we get weird, because right here in the middle of the foot, right, the sole with the toe and the heel, we have a mouth. Okay, so the opening here is called a mouth. So look, these are traditional. Don't ask me why in the world they came up with this, but these are the names. The mouth is where the blade sticks through and cuts the wood as the plane is moved across the surface of the wood. Behind the mouth, as you come up to the top side, up in here, okay, you see the mouth, and this whole area up in here, this is known as the throat. All right. Then we've got a couple of holes that you can see, 4 of them. This is a mounting hole for one of the handles. This is another mounting hole for a handle. And these 2 mounting holes are for the big triangular central part that goes in here that's called the frog. So let's start off with this knob up here. Okay, it's a handle, and it's called a knob. Looks like a doorknob. That's the way I always remember it. Yeah, and a knob is the name for a rounded handle. So let's put that in here. Basically, the function of this thing, the knob, is to steer left or right. Okay? As you're pushing the plane forward, you need to be able to steer it. And that's why it being round makes sense, because your hand kind of can slip along to pivot the direction that your plane is going in. The next handle, the big handle back here, is called the tote, and there's a reason for that. They call it a tote because if you're carrying something back in the day, you were said to be toting it. You were toting water from the well, or you were toting firewood out of the forest. So if you're going to carry something and you have a handle used for carrying, that handle would be called a tote. And that's why this handle is called the tote. It's used for doing the carrying of the plane, putting it away, taking it out, carrying it with you when you're going to go into a work site. That's why that's called the tote. Now, this big triangular part, all right, sits in the middle of the frog, and everything else that is connected to this plane is connected onto this frog. But first, before we go any further about this frog, let's look at what's already on the frog. First, there's this lever, okay, and it moves left and right. And this is called the lateral adjustment lever. And what it does is when it pivots here, this little circular disc fits into an opening in the blade, and it takes the blade and shoves it from one side to the other. And what it's doing is allowing the front edge of the blade to be lined up with this front edge here, which is going to pass through the mouth. So we want to have our blade flat against the wood that we're cutting, and this allows us to adjust that, to tweak that, to get it just right. The other thing that's already mounted on here is a wheel. And this wheel, as it goes in and out, moves this yoke. And I'm going to move this up here where you can see it a little better. There's a yoke, and that yoke goes through the body of this frog, which is this triangular piece. The yoke sticks up here. And as you rotate this wheel, you'll see this goes down or this comes back up. And what that's doing is sticking the blade further down or pulling it, retracting it away from the wood. And that's how you adjust the depth of your cut. How big a bite are you taking? The other thing that's already mounted inside of this frog is this little screw, okay, or bolt. And what it's for, we'll come back to, but just remember it's in there. And we'll talk about that one in a little bit. Let's take this, mount it into our plane. Now, like I said, there are two holes that we're going to mount into, which correspond to these two holes here. All right, we're going to stick bolts through there, into those holes, and mount this frog. An important thing to notice before we put that on are these parts right here. These shiny parts back here, right behind the frog mounting bolt holes. And this part up front, where you see some shiny parts too. These are flat parts that are very carefully machined to make sure that this frog is going to be lined up perfectly with the body, with this base. They correspond to these parts on the bottom, the shiny parts here that you see. And what this does is give us a very positive alignment, and it allows also for us to adjust this frog forwards or backwards so that we can line up this ramp. This whole thing is a ramp that the blade sits on, and we want to line this ramp up with this last little bit of the ramp. Sorry, let me move in here. This last little bit of the ramp that's in the actual base of the plane. So we need to move that frog back or forward and line it up perfectly with that. So let's get that mounted in here and lined up. And first, we don't worry about lining it up. We just worry about trying to get these bolts to go into the holes and get started, which sometimes can be a bit of a pain, but this one is not being that bad. So we'll get this mounted in, and then you'll see how you can slide the frog forwards or backwards. And we leave it just snug where we can barely move. Now if you look down in here, what you will see is that this plane has this angle on it, and we want this angle to coincide with this bottom angle down inside the mouth. And what I can see right now is there's a little bit of a ridge, so I need to slide the frog forward just a tad, little teeny bit. So I'm going to just wiggle it and get it moving forward. Make sure it's lined up well. And when I have it just so, then I'll tighten down these bolts. And everything to do with the frog is something to do with making an adjustment like that. Controlling how this plane is set up, that it's aligned, that the blade is aligned left and right, that the depth of the blade can be controlled. Next, let's put together, or take apart so I can show you this. This assembly is called the blade assembly. Okay, it's got three parts. It's got a chip breaker, which is this part that has a little hump that goes on the top of the assembly. Underneath that is the blade, and on the very bottom we have this screw which goes through the blade into the chip breaker, which you can see here. So when we take this off, you can see those different parts. There's the little chip breaker screw. There's your chip breaker, which goes on the top. It's spring loaded because that works as a spring. And here's the blade, which does the actual cutting. That is razor sharp. Okay, got to be careful with those. The way you assemble these pieces is you start with your chip breaker first, and you put this chip breaker screw into the chip breaker from the bottom, from the underside. And you can tell the underside because the curve goes down. That's the downside, the underside. So you put that in. You'll notice in your blade you have this circular area. You put it across, all right, and then you slide it way up so that this sharpened blade will be beyond the edge of the chip breaker. And I've just done something stupid because I put it on backwards. And let me explain how to tell that. If you look here, you can see this is the flat upper part of the blade. On the bottom of the blade, we have this bevel. And in a plane like this, the bevel always goes downwards. Okay, it goes down like that. The flat side is up. So, if I'm coming in to the bottom of this, I need to put the bottom of this blade with the bevel. I remember bevel and bottom. That needs to go across like that. And then I slide it way down this open slot so that the edge of the blade, okay, as I bring it across, it's not going to hit this chip breaker. All right, so there I have it put together, but it's very loose. Now I'm going to tighten this screw up, just hand tight with my fingers, and I can slide this chip breaker down to the edge of this blade. And you want to get it to a point where it's just barely off the edge of that blade, just by the amount of the thickness of the shaving that you want to cut. That's pretty good right there. We won't try to get it perfectly perfect, but close enough. Now I'm going to just tighten that up, snug it, and I have reassembled my blade assembly. Now take the blade assembly with the chip breaker, with the hump, upwards. We're going to place it into the plane, and this screw that I told you that we would talk about later is going to go through this bottom hole. We're going to stick the blade out through the mouth. Okay, there it is protruding. All right, then remember our yoke that controls the depth? Well, it can only function if it is stuck into this slot. So when we place this on, we need to get that yoke to stick through here. So I actually need to screw my yoke back in because I've gone too far with it, and get it to a point where I actually can stick it through that slot. So let me do that. And I've goofed it up again. Hold on. If you go too far, the yoke will actually come out of its little ridges that it's supposed to ride in, so I have to get it to stick back down. There it goes. Now it's inside of those ridges, and then I need to tighten it up. Okay, and now if you look from the front, what you can see sticking out in this slot, okay, is the yoke sticking through the little slot here. Alright, remember this lateral adjustment? The circle here fits into this slot, okay, right above where the yoke sticks into this slot. So this allows the left and right adjustment. So watch the blade. As I turn it, if I push the lever to this side, the blade leans to that side. It goes opposite. If I push it the other way, the blade will come back this way. And that's how we can get it square down along the bottom where we're doing our cutting. Now I said we'd come back to this screw or bolt. Alright? And what that is a pivot point. There has to be something to hold all this together like a big sandwich. It has to put pressure on here. Enough pressure to keep it from getting out of adjustment as you're planing, but not so much pressure that you can't adjust the depth or the left or right alignment of the blade. The purpose of this piece, which is called by various names, the most reasonable one to me is a lever cap, because it has this part, a lever. If you can see, as you shut that lever down, it's going to put pressure downwards. And this bolt sticks through here, which is a pivot point, which allows, as this pushes downwards, the lever pushes down, this back end lifts up, and the front edge presses down onto this blade, onto the chip breaker on top of the blade. If you watch that, you can see that now. I'm going to put it in, and it's there, it's sitting there, but as I lower the lever, alright, you'll hear a click, alright, and that's the tension being placed onto this. And now nothing's coming out. It's all in there. But it's not in there so tight that we can't maneuver as we need to with these adjustments, left and right, or changing our depth. Okay, we can raise the blade or lower the blade as we need to. And by using these things in combination, we have nice control over how this blade sticks out. Let me move it up here so you can see it. You can see the blade here, and as I move the lateral adjustment lever, you can see that that will change and stick one edge further out than the other. I'll do it the opposite way. There you go. Okay, and we can adjust this until we get it even as far as how much distance there is from this leading edge to the leading edge of the mouth. Once we get that set up, we can adjust our depth. And I'm actually retracting the blade to bring it back up inside, and right now it's not sticking out at all. So if I rub this over a surface, it's not going to cut. But if I take a piece of wood and I put it here in my vise, what you can see is it's not cutting at all, but as I adjust this depth to make that blade stick out more, and I'm adjusting it like this, turning it with my fingertips, I begin to get that blade to stick out of the bottom. And that blade will begin to cut into the wood. Right now it's barely touching. Oh, okay. There we go. Not deep enough. Okay. And there you have it. We're making cuts with the blade. The purpose of that chip breaker is to make this, what would have been a straight cut, into a curl. It curls it up. And it breaks the fibers and turns it into these nice curls. So we've got our blade doing its job of cutting. Chip breaker is breaking the chips and turning them into curls, which brings them up into the throat so that we can clear them out with our fingers. We steer with our knob and we push on our tote. You can use this plane going, as I am, right-handed, okay? Or you can turn it around and use it just as easily left-handed. So it works for southpaws as well as those of us who are right-handed. So anyway, I hope that'll help you a little bit, Angie. I appreciate you sending me the question. If anybody has questions about anything that I've explained, or if you have a question that you'd like to see answered on the channel, please send it in the comments. And I'll see you on the next video.